Imagine a palace so vast, so dazzling, that it could swallow entire villages, where every corridor whispers secrets of power and betrayal. Welcome to Versailles. The Palace of Versailles was not born of grandeur, but of a simple hunting lodge, tucked within the thick forests and rolling hills of Ile-de-France. Louis XIII, a king already conscious of power yet cautious of display, walked these woods with bow and arrow, imagining a retreat from the weight of a crown. Few could have guessed that these humble walls, modest and unassuming, would one day serve as the seed for a kingdom's most audacious expression of authority. Even as the lodge grew, its stones whispering of hunts and whispered counsels, the shadow of ambition stretched over every timber, every thatched roof, invisible yet undeniable. The air itself seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of a future empire, though no one at the time dared to speak its name. It was Louis XIV, the Sun King, who transformed this private refuge into an emblem of absolute rule. He did not merely expand the lodge, he reimagined the land, commanding the soil itself to bend to his vision. Entire forests were cleared with the precision of a general, rivers rerouted, and marshlands drained, not for comfort, but to impose order over chaos. The gardens, conceived by the architect André Lenôtre, were not just beautiful, they were statements, mathematical assertions that the world could be tamed, measured, and dominated. Every tree, every fountain, every carefully sculpted hedge bore witness to the obsession of a king who sought to turn nature into a stage, the stage upon which he alone would perform the drama of power. The human cost was hidden beneath the splendor. Peasants who had lived and labored on the land for generations were displaced quietly, their homes dismantled, their lives uprooted. Carpenters, masons, and laborers worked without rest under the gaze of overseers, their sweat soaking into the marble and mortar that would one day be admired by royalty and diplomats. Legends whisper of nights when men labored under torchlight, their exhaustion etched into every crack and seam of the emerging palace, while the king, draped in velvet, strolled through his expanding hallways, contemplating symmetry and glory. And yet, few records capture the quiet suffering, the whispered prayers of those whose lives were the first sacrifice on the altar of Versailles. Louis XIV's obsession was not merely with space, but with control. Each wing added to the lodge was a reflection of his desire to surround himself with loyalty, obedience, and awe. Architects and artists were drawn into his orbit, their brilliance harnessed to create not just rooms, but statements of dominance. Painters like Charles Le Brun worked tirelessly to fill ceilings with frescoes that proclaimed the king as godlike, imbuing every stroke with symbols meant to inspire devotion and fear in equal measure. Sculptors carved marble with delicate precision, yet each figure seemed to echo a larger narrative. The subjugation of nature, the perfection of order, and the centrality of one man's will. And within these walls, courtiers learned quickly that their every gesture, their every smile or frown, was a performance scrutinized under the weight of absolute authority. As the palace grew, so too did its labyrinthine complexity. Corridors multiplied, staircases spiraled, and wings extended in a pattern both elegant and confounding. Yet the grandeur was always a veil, concealing the immense human strain beneath. Laborers and artisans toiled under extreme conditions, their lives bound to the palace in a way that history often ignores. Records hint at injuries, exhaustion, and even disappearances quietly erased from the official narrative. And still, the work continued, because ambition is relentless, because a king's vision has no patience for mortality or fatigue. Within these walls, the distinction between glory and suffering blurred. The palace was a monument not only to a man, but to the sacrifices that built him, sacrifices that would echo silently for centuries. The transformation of Versailles was also a psychological endeavor. Louis XIV understood that power is as much perception as it is structure. The lodge's modest beginnings made the eventual explosion of opulence all the more astonishing. Visitors arriving by carriage would traverse long, manicured avenues, each designed to inspire awe before they even glimpsed the palace itself. The effect was intentional, to overwhelm, to humble, to impress upon every subject and diplomat that they were entering the domain of a king who controlled time, space, and destiny. And yet, beneath the sparkling facades, the corridors held secrets. Hidden rooms, concealed staircases, and service passages carried the unseen hands of workers, courtiers, and sometimes lovers, all weaving stories that would never reach the official histories. Luxury was inseparable from tension. Every gilded room, Every mirrored wall, every sparkling fountain was also a stage for intrigue, envy, and quiet desperation. The Sun King's insistence on controlling every detail created both beauty and anxiety, perfection and paranoia. Courtiers lived in fear of missteps, knowing that one careless glance or word could result in disgrace. Meanwhile, the laborers who built the palace saw only a fraction of the glory, their efforts anonymous, their sweat absorbed into the foundation, beauty and suffering intertwined. And the palace itself seemed to pulse with the duality of triumph and human cost. Even as Versailles rose into the sky, the surrounding landscape bore witness to lives altered irrevocably. Farmers, craftsmen, and villagers once connected to the land now found themselves on its periphery, strangers to the stage they had unwittingly provided. Rumors circulated of quiet rebellion, of resentment simmering beneath the stately fountains, yet such dissent was carefully contained. The palace was not only a residence, but a machine of influence, designed to channel ambition, devotion, and fear toward a singular purpose, the glorification of the king. And in its silence, the building seemed to hold its own consciousness, aware of the tension and sacrifices embedded in every stone, every gilded cornice, every shadowed corner. Louis XIV's personal life became inseparable from Versailles itself. The palace was his mirror, his fortress, and his cage. The corridors that hosted diplomatic triumphs also carried the solitude of a man consumed by his own vision. Nights spent in reflection or planning were punctuated by the faint sounds of laborers, still working on what would never be theirs, echoing the relentless rhythm of ambition. Each sunrise brought renewed construction, further expansion, more demands upon human endurance, and yet the king moved through his creation with an air of effortless command. Visitors marveled at the gardens, the fountains, and the sparkling halls, unaware that each moment of splendor rested upon a hidden foundation of exhaustion, sacrifice, and quiet grief. And so Versailles was born from both vision and obsession. Its history is not merely a chronology of kings and architects, but a tapestry woven from human endurance, ambition, and desire. The lodge that once offered solitude became a palace of unrivaled power, a statement in stone, marble, and gold, yet the shadows linger. Beneath the mirrors and gilded ceilings lies the memory of those who built, served, and lived in its embrace. Every corner of Versailles carries a trace of hidden cost, of tension, of lives quietly reshaped by ambition. To step within these walls is to witness not only the triumph of a king, but the hidden human stories that gave him dominion over a kingdom, revealing that beauty is often inseparable from struggle, and splendor is never without sacrifice. The Palace of Versailles arises not merely from stone and mortar, but from obsession, a physical manifestation of a king's desire to bend the world to his will. Each wall is deliberate, each column calculated, as if the very universe had been reduced to geometry, awaiting the Sun King's command. Light itself is manipulated here, captured in gilded mirrors that stretch along the Hall of Mirrors, doubling the sun, multiplying its brilliance, forcing visitors to feel the weight of power in every reflection. The architecture is not neutral, it is coercive, an invisible hand guiding awe, fear, and admiration with a precision that borders on tyranny. And yet, beneath its majesty there exists a pulse of human struggle, hidden in the sweat of craftsmen, in the quivering hands of artists, in the endless labor of those who shaped what no single human could truly claim. Every corridor seems to stretch beyond reason, a ribbon of marble and gold that confuses time, blurring the boundary between day and night, between the king and those who serve him. Staircases spiral into the unknown, their steps polished by generations of careful feet, each echo carrying whispers of secrets, conspiracies, and the subtle politics of survival. Courtiers learned quickly that architecture here was not only beauty, it was surveillance, a system that allowed Louis XIV to observe, to manipulate, to command even in silence. A glance down a hallway could reveal a fault, a betrayal, a hesitation. No corridor is merely passage. Every stone carries intent, every arch a silent assertion of authority. The ceilings are masterpieces that demand devotion, painted by artists who poured their genius into frescoes that spoke both of divine right and human ambition. Gods and allegories float across vaulted expanses, their eyes eternally watching, silently judging. The artisans who painted them worked suspended on scaffolding, hours turning into days, days into months, their bodies aching, faces streaked with plaster dust. Yet they carried on, compelled by expectation, fear, and the faint glimmer of immortality. And as the final strokes were set, the halls gleamed with perfection, hiding the tremors of human effort beneath layers of gold leaf and pigment. Few visitors pause to consider the hands that bled, the backs that ached, the unspoken stories embedded in every brushstroke. The gardens extend like a living testament to the king's dominance over nature. Trees are planted with the precision of a mathematician, fountains orchestrated with mechanical perfection, canals stretching beyond sightlines to create illusions of infinity. Yet the creation of such splendor required armies of workers, carpenters, and gardeners whose toil transformed marshlands into an ordered Eden. Their labor is invisible in the polished lawns and symmetrical avenues, erased by the brilliance of design. And sometimes, at dawn, when mist curls over the fountains, one can almost sense the ghosts of those laborers walking the gardens, carrying the weight of a king's dreams in their calloused hands. Mirrors, the signature of Versailles, do more than reflect, they command perception. In the Hall of Mirrors, light is weaponized, multiplied, and made to overwhelm. Diplomats arrive dazzled, courtiers are humbled, and all feel the presence of the king not as a man, but as an omnipresent force. But behind the mirrored walls, hidden chambers remain, spaces where secrets were whispered, love and betrayal intertwined, and the machinery of politics operated unseen. The architecture creates theater, yet also conceals the raw human tension that unfolds behind every gilded door. The throne room, the queen's apartments, the galleries of kings past, each space is a lesson in hierarchy, control, and display. Rooms are constructed to impress, to dominate, to remind all who enter of their place. The ceiling heights, the scale of windows, the intricacy of parquet floors, even the pattern of tapestries, all are calculated to elevate the king while diminishing the visitor. Every choice in scale, color, and proportion is a reminder that beauty at Versailles is inseparable from power. Yet for those who built it, every step forward was a negotiation with exhaustion, ambition, and fear. The palace is as much a record of labor as it is of taste, as much a monument to human endurance as to royal whim. Yet the palace is not static. Hidden stairways twist through walls, corridors curve into unlit corners, and small service passages allow unseen movement. These are spaces where the hierarchy of Versailles is both enforced and subverted, where servants move like shadows, where lovers meet in secret, and where conspiracies quietly take shape. The architecture is both a cage and a tool, shaping human behavior with invisible lines, guiding lives through space, as if by design, shaping destinies alongside design. It is a world where geometry and psychology merge, where beauty enforces obedience, and where every shadow carries the weight of possibility. The fountains, mechanical marvels that spray water in synchronized symphonies, appear effortless, a natural celebration of life and abundance. Yet their operation requires meticulous engineering, canals and reservoirs hidden beneath the palace grounds, workers maintaining pumps, valves, and mechanisms that no visitor ever sees. Water becomes a symbol of both control and spectacle, a reminder that every delight, every luxury, is backed by human ingenuity and toil. And sometimes, if one listens closely, one can imagine the quiet frustration of those who labored in darkness to make the palace sparkle, their sweat and precision concealed beneath the brilliance of water arcs and golden statues. Even the furniture and fixtures are calculated performances, gilded chairs, and carved tables arranged to assert hierarchy, wealth, and taste. Every element, down to the smallest doorknob, is a statement, chosen to communicate power and permanence. And yet, these objects also bear witness to the invisible cost. The artisans who spent years perfecting delicate carvings, their hands raw, their eyes strained, working under the king's unyielding gaze. Luxury is inseparable from obsession, beauty entwined with fatigue, and perfection always shadowed by human limitation. Versailles, in its vastness and symmetry, seems eternal, yet it is a monument to relentless human tension. The palace enforces a rhythm, awe, intimidation, submission, admiration. Every visitor, every subject, every worker becomes part of its choreography. The architecture itself dictates behavior, molds psychology, and orchestrates emotion. Yet beneath the layers of gold and marble, human fragility persists. Fatigue, longing, ambition, fear, and the quiet despair of those whose labor makes the impossible appear effortless. The palace is both a triumph of vision and a repository of hidden stories, a testament to the tension between human aspiration and human limitation. To walk through Versailles is to experience both majesty and anxiety. The architecture compels contemplation, admiration, and humility, yet it also provokes reflection on the human cost of splendor. Every mirrored corridor, every sculpted garden, every painted ceiling tells of obsession, labor, and the hidden currents of life beneath the veneer of perfection. The palace is alive with the resonance of countless unseen lives, their efforts absorbed into walls, floors, and fountains, their sacrifices concealed in the symmetry and beauty that dazzles the world. Each element, from the grandest gallery to the narrowest hidden passage, carries a weight beyond measurement, a tension between appearance and reality, ambition and mortality, splendor and the human soul. Versailles was more than stone and gardens, it was a stage upon which the ambitions, vanity, and vulnerabilities of men and women played out in endless, exquisite drama. Each morning the corridors echoed with the footsteps of courtiers, their polished shoes striking marble with a rhythm that spoke of obedience and fear. The king's presence dominated every hall, every mirrored reflection, every gilded ornament. To live within these walls was to perform constantly, to anticipate scrutiny even when none was present, to balance ambition with survival, desire with discretion. Behind every sumptuous banquet, every dazzling ball, lurked tension, intrigue, and the fragile calculus of human emotion, unseen by those who only admired the palace from a distance. The courtiers learned quickly that Versailles rewarded cleverness and punished naivety. Alliances were made in whispers, sealed with nods, and betrayed in silence. A smile could be a weapon, a glance a declaration of loyalty or defiance. The king's attention was currency, his favor a prize so precious that men and women bent their lives entirely to obtain it. In the queen's apartments, in the shadowed corridors, secrets multiplied. Lovers met in hidden corners, plotting and dreaming, while servants moved like ghosts, bearing messages, observing gestures, and ensuring that the invisible machinery of power continued without falter. And through it all, the tension was almost palpable, a quiet vibration that underpinned the glittering surface of court life. Marie Antoinette arrived at Versailles carrying the weight of a nation's expectation and the whispers of foreign suspicion. She walked through halls that had witnessed generations of ambition, her beauty a spectacle, her manners scrutinized with merciless attention. Yet behind her poised smile there was isolation. The queen, surrounded by extravagance and splendor, often felt invisible, a performer whose audience was never fully kind. Even in the gardens, as fountains played and statues glistened in sunlight, she was conscious of the gaze of courtiers, the unspoken judgment of history, and the growing resentment of a people who saw only her wealth, not the subtle diplomacy and quiet sacrifices behind each gesture. Every party, every performance of elegance, carried the undercurrent of human longing and vulnerability, as if the walls themselves were observing, cataloging, and silently judging. The banquets were wonders to behold, yet each table was also a battlefield. Courtiers maneuvered for position, alliances shifted with every course, and conversations were carefully weighed for implication. Servants moved like shadows, presenting delicacies, refilling goblets, and witnessing the private dramas of those whose lives were entwined with the palace. The splendor was intoxicating, but the tension was constant. One misstep, one careless word, one unnoticed glance could unravel a reputation painstakingly constructed over months or years. Behind the laughter and music, hearts raced with anxiety, the human cost of performance hidden beneath the veneer of glamour and ceremony. Even within the Sun King's inner circle, the palace was a place of relentless calculation. Ministers, generals, and advisors carried the weight of kingdoms while navigating the fragile politics of proximity. The king's favor could elevate or destroy, and the corridors themselves were instruments of control. A meeting in a mirrored gallery, a discussion on a balcony overlooking the gardens, could change the trajectory of a life. The architecture facilitated observation, allowing power to move silently, invisibly, as if the palace itself were alive, guiding interactions, amplifying ambition, and enforcing the delicate balance between loyalty and fear. Every smile, every bow, every gesture carried significance, magnified by the weight of history and the expectations of eternity. The tragedies of Versailles were not always dramatic or immediate. They were subtle, lingering, woven into the fabric of daily life. Illnesses spread silently through crowded apartments. Exhaustion crept into the bone of servants and courtiers alike, and whispered disappointments became lifelong scars. The human cost of grandeur is rarely measured in headlines or chronicles. It is found in the small, quiet sufferings, in the hearts of those whose devotion built empires, yet whose names vanish into obscurity. The palace, for all its beauty, was a crucible where ambition burned fiercely, often consuming those who believed themselves untouchable. And still, the desire to be seen, to be recognized, to exist within these golden walls, drew countless individuals into its orbit, even as it demanded their energy, dignity, and sometimes their very souls. Behind the gilded surfaces, clandestine stories unfolded with delicate intensity. Secret lovers, forbidden friendships, whispered confessions, and hidden betrayals moved through the palace, like invisible currents. The king's own private moments were suffused with careful orchestration. Every choice weighed against appearance and implication. Those who sought influence learned to navigate the hidden patterns of human desire, reading expressions, listening to silences, and interpreting gestures that spoke louder than words. It was a world where perception and reality entwined, where the smallest oversight could ripple outward, altering destinies in ways unseen, and where human ambition collided with the weight of history in every gilded room. The queen's isolation deepened with each passing year, her inner world filled with longing, uncertainty, and the quiet ache of separation from normalcy. The ceremonial life of Versailles, with its endless balls and processions, amplified both fascination and alienation. Even amid laughter and music, the human heart was often heavy. Friends could not always be trusted, and enemies were everywhere in disguise. The palace, for all its artistry, functioned as a magnifying glass, amplifying emotion, ambition, and sorrow, revealing the vulnerabilities of those who sought the king's favor or merely survival within its walls. Every mirrored reflection carried the silent witness of observation. Every chandelier sparkled with both beauty and unspoken tension. As political crises began to loom, Versailles became a pressure cooker of human emotion. The walls that celebrated triumph also held the anxieties of a nation, the fears of a monarchy under strain. Courtiers whispered of rebellion and rumor, and even the smallest acts of defiance could ripple through the palace with unexpected force. The king's obsession with control extended to minutiae, yet the human heart cannot be fully contained. Behind the ordered symmetry of gardens and galleries, chaos simmered in private conversations, in fleeting glances, in the quiet despair of those whose lives were dictated by proximity to power. Versailles was at once a palace of triumph and a crucible of tension, a place where the human spirit both soared and faltered. Servants, often invisible to the eye of history, bore witness to the grandest dramas. Their movements, disciplined and careful, ensured the machinery of power functioned seamlessly. Yet they themselves lived in the shadows of magnificence. The exhaustion, the fear, the quiet sacrifices of those who labored unseen are woven into the very fabric of Versailles, absorbed into the walls, floors, and fountains. The palace was alive with human tension, with the collision of desire and duty, ambition and fragility, pleasure and suffering. It was both a triumph of vision and a testament to the human cost of beauty, an enduring reminder that every glittering surface is supported by countless unseen struggles. Even as the Sun King's reign reached its height, the fragility of human life and emotion remained palpable. Courtiers aged, relationships fractured, hearts broke quietly, and yet the performance of power continued, uninterrupted, rehearsed, and perfected. Versailles demanded perfection, yet human imperfections seeped through the gilded edges, leaving traces of emotion, grief, longing, and fleeting joy. Every whispered secret, every hidden glance, every quiet act of defiance or devotion contributed to the palace's living narrative, an intricate tapestry of human experience concealed beneath the brilliance of gold and marble. And so Versailles stands as both a monument to ambition and a repository of human emotion. Its halls and galleries are not merely spaces of art and architecture. They are living records of desire, fear, betrayal, and devotion. To walk within them is to feel the pulse of countless lives entwined with the palace's destiny, to sense the quiet tragedies and triumphs that unfold beyond public view, and to recognize that grandeur is inseparable from human tension. The stories of love, power, obsession, and sacrifice are embedded in every reflection, every corridor, every gilded ceiling, waiting to be witnessed by those who dare to look beyond the surface. Versailles today is a place of quiet reverence, a palace that hums with the echoes of its past, alive in ways both subtle and profound. The gardens stretch in perfect symmetry, fountains glimmer with sunlight, and the Hall of Mirrors reflects thousands of faces each year. Yet beneath this apparent serenity, the weight of centuries presses against every stone. Tourists wander the corridors, cameras raised, unaware of the invisible threads that connect them to the countless lives whose labor built these walls. The palace is a living testament not only to ambition and art, but to human endurance, a delicate ecosystem of memory, beauty, and obsession, still fragile despite its monumental presence. Every step through the marble halls is a negotiation with time. The polished floors gleam, yet beneath them lie centuries of dust, dirt, and human toil, traces of artisans who shaped wood, stone, and plaster with hands both skilled and weary. Conservators move quietly, their fingers tracing cracks in gilded cornices, examining ceiling for fading frescoes, measuring moisture in the walls, each gesture a battle against decay. The beauty of Versailles is an illusion that requires endless care, and the labor behind it is invisible to most eyes. Every restoration uncovers a new layer of history, a hidden detail that reminds us of the palace's dual nature, dazzling yet vulnerable, eternal yet impermanent, a monument to ambition and to the relentless passage of time. The gardens, celebrated as masterpieces of order and precision, carry their own secrets. Every tree, every hedge, every fountain is maintained by a tireless army of gardeners whose work is choreographed to preserve symmetry and spectacle. Yet nature resists. Seasons shift, storms strike, and the greenery must be managed, pruned, and coaxed into submission. Water flows through intricate networks powered by mechanisms conceived centuries ago, yet requiring careful attention to remain operational. The spectacle that delights visitors is in constant negotiation with entropy, a reminder that beauty cannot exist without vigilance, that perfection is a fragile, human-managed illusion. Inside the palace, rooms that once hosted kings and queens now host millions of strangers. Footsteps echo over centuries, a rhythm of curiosity and admiration. Yet these halls carry a weight heavier than any visitor can perceive. Every chandelier, every gilded frame, every mirrored wall is a vessel of memory, storing fragments of conversation, whispers of intrigue, sighs of longing, and tremors of fear. Even as guides explain the historical significance, the palace retains a private life of its own, a consciousness shaped by decades of labor, human emotion, and the relentless effort to sustain what was designed to impress, control, and dominate. The beauty that seems effortless is in fact the result of centuries of care, sacrifice, and obsession. Tourists pause in the Hall of Mirrors, marveling at the light and symmetry, but few notice the hidden chambers behind those reflections. These secret rooms, once used for private meetings, clandestine affairs, and whispered conspiracies, remain inaccessible, preserved as fragments of a story that continues to fascinate. Conservators who maintain the palace are acutely aware of these spaces, their work a delicate balance between preservation and revelation. Each hidden passage holds a human story, some tragic, some romantic, all bound to the pulse of Versailles itself. The palace does not merely contain history, it remembers it, silently, insistently, like a living witness. Even modern interventions cannot erase the palace's fragility. Air conditioning, controlled lighting, and protective barriers are necessary to protect art and architecture, yet they create tension between accessibility and preservation. Visitors tread carefully, guided by rules designed to safeguard the palace. Yet the human desire to experience, to touch, to feel, persists. Every footstep is both homage and threat, a reminder that beauty is delicate and time is unrelenting. Conservators move between these extremes, balancing admiration with caution, laboring to ensure that future generations may witness the same grandeur, while confronting the impermanence that shadows even the most monumental of creation. The palace is also a place of stories rediscovered. Letters, diaries, and artifacts occasionally surface during restoration, offering glimpses into the lives of those who lived and worked within its walls. A servant's scribbled note, a forgotten gift, a painted signature on a hidden beam, all become fragments of a larger narrative that reconnects the present with the human drama of the past. The effort to preserve Versailles is therefore not only about architecture and art, but about people, the quiet, often invisible individuals whose work and existence are imprinted in every corner. To care for the palace is to honor them, to recognize that behind every gilded surface lies a human heartbeat. The public perception of Versailles today contrasts sharply with its hidden realities. It is seen as a jewel, a symbol of elegance, wealth, and history, Yet the reality is far more complex. The palace is a living organism breathing through maintenance, conservation, and the rhythms of human traffic. It hums with the tension of past and present, of grandeur and vulnerability, of the human stories that have always been inseparable from its walls. Visitors may marvel at ceilings, tapestries, and gardens, yet the true majesty of Versailles is revealed only to those who sense the invisible currents, the quiet sacrifice, the painstaking labor, the obsessive attention to detail, and the human drama etched into every stone. Fountains play their music in the gardens, yet their operation is an invisible symphony of mechanics and human effort. Pipes, pumps, and valves demand constant attention, their failure threatening the illusion of effortless perfection. Gardeners move through the fountains as if conducting a delicate ritual, their bodies shaping the flow of water, controlling both spectacle and narrative. The dance of human skill and mechanical ingenuity is ongoing, a modern echo of the labor that built the palace centuries ago. The fountains remind us that Versailles is not frozen in time. It is alive, demanding care, commanding attention, and requiring devotion from those who engage with it. Even in the quietest corners, shadows of human emotion linger. A faded tapestry may conceal a worker's scratch mark, a small signature left in defiance or pride, a reminder that even the invisible can endure. Conservators discover such traces daily, small testaments to the presence of those whose hands, eyes, and hearts contributed to Versailles' grandeur. The palace is layered with human experience, both celebrated and hidden, and to walk its halls is to encounter the sum of centuries of devotion, obsession, and tension. Every surface, every reflection, every whisper of wind through the gardens carries the resonance of lives lived in the service of beauty, power, and memory. Versailles today is therefore a bridge between eras, a place where the ambitions of kings meet the quiet dedication of those who preserve their legacy. Every restoration, every guided tour, every careful adjustment to the environment is an act of reverence, an acknowledgement that the palace's survival depends on vigilance and care. Yet there is a tension inherent in this stewardship. The desire to reveal, to educate, and to inspire must always be balanced against the necessity of protection. The palace remains both spectacle and secret, an enduring testament to human aspiration, labor, and the fragile impermanence of even the grandest achievement. And so Versailles continues to captivate, to inspire awe, to demand attention, yet it does so quietly, with the subtle insistence of centuries of human endeavor. Its beauty is apparent, yet its essence lies in the invisible, in the sweat of artisans, in the vigilance of concertors, in the quiet endurance of gardeners, in the echo of footsteps that carry memory through mirrored halls. The palace is both monument and organism, a living, breathing chronicle of ambition, beauty, and human persistence, reminding all who enter that behind every flourish, every gilded corner, every sparkling fountain, there exists a story of effort, sacrifice, and quiet devotion, still unfolding, still alive, still demanding to be seen and understood. Versailles stands today not only as a palace, but as a living testament to centuries of ambition, artistry, and human devotion. Yet its survival depends on vigilance, on the careful hands of those who refuse to let history slip quietly into oblivion. Every gilded frame, every polished floor, every carved column is fragile, a delicate balance between endurance and decay. Conservators move through the halls with an almost sacred attentiveness, their eyes tracing cracks in ceilings, their fingers brushing dust from frescoes, their bodies absorbing the weight of centuries. They labor quietly, often unnoticed, yet their work is the invisible scaffolding that holds the palace's story together, preventing it from dissolving under the pressure of time, weather, and human curiosity. The process of preservation is both meticulous and relentless. Layers of gold leaf must be restored, frescoes retouched, parquet floors repaired without disturbing the patina of history. Every intervention is a negotiation between fidelity and function, a dialogue with the past, a recognition that beauty is inseparable from fragility. Conservators must think not only of what the palace once was, but of what it can become, weighing the desires of visitors, historians, and scholars against the unyielding demands of gravity, climate, and centuries of human use. The human cost is silent but profound, long hours, painstaking precision, and an obsession with detail that mirrors, in its intensity, the vision that created Versailles itself. Yet preservation is not merely technical. It is also emotional. To work in Versailles is to inhabit a space saturated with human stories, to to feel the pulse of ambition, desire, and fear that flows through the halls like an unseen current. The gilded mirrors, the soaring ceilings, the endless gardens, they are beautiful because of the labor they conceal. And those who maintain them are acutely aware of their responsibility to honor the artisans and laborers who built this world, to sustain their legacy, and to recognize that behind every flourish lies human sweat, fatigue, and sacrifice. Each restored corner is a tribute, a quiet act of remembrance that connects present hands to the ghosts of centuries past. The gardens, perhaps the most visible symbol of Versailles grandeur, demand constant vigilance. Trees must be pruned with exacting care, hedges sculpted to maintain their geometric perfection, fountains maintained so that their arcs remain flawless. Water systems conceived centuries ago require continual adjustment and repair. Hidden mechanisms coaxed to life by technicians who move unseen beneath the marble terraces. Their work is a dialogue with the past, an effort to preserve not only aesthetics but intention, to sustain the vision of Louis XIV, to keep the choreography of space and water intact, and to honor the centuries of human toil that made these illusions of perfection possible. Every restoration carries with it a curiosity, a revelation. Hidden chambers are discovered, signatures of craftsmen emerge, fragments of layers or sketches reveal stories long forgotten. Each discovery reframes the understanding of Versailles, exposing layers of human complexity behind the gold, marble, and mirrors. The palace is not static, it is alive with history, and each conservation effort uncovers not only physical structures but human emotion, ambition, and obsession. The palace speaks to those who listen carefully, whispering stories of triumph, despair, devotion, and betrayal, and reminding us that preservation is an act of dialogue with lives that once shaped and were shaped by this extraordinary place. The logistics of preservation are staggering. Millions of visitors traverse the halls each year, and their presence, though vital to the palace's cultural significance, exerts subtle pressure on the structure itself. Floors where temperature and humidity fluctuate, and every footstep leaves a trace. Conservators must anticipate, mitigate, and restore, balancing accessibility with protection. The human effort behind this is immense, often invisible to the public eye, yet it is the lifeblood that keeps Versailles from becoming a fragile relic of history. Every choice, every intervention, is weighted with the knowledge that centuries of ambition, labor, and artistry depend on meticulous care. Artisans and restorers confront the tension between permanence and impermanence every day. Marble can crack, gilding can fade, frescoes can crumble, and wood can warp. Yet each fragile surface carries the imprint of human hands across generations, a continuum of effort and devotion. To preserve Versailles is to preserve the memory of countless individuals whose work, skill, and dedication have been absorbed into the very fabric of the palace. The human dimension of this labor is as profound as the architecture itself. Without the continued attention, care, and obsession of living craftsmen, the palace would cease to embody the vitality and genius that make it extraordinary. The significance of preservation extends beyond walls and gardens. It is cultural, historical, and emotional. Versailles is a mirror, reflecting the grandeur and folly of human ambition, the interplay of power, obsession, and creativity. To sustain it is to sustain a narrative that encompasses triumph and tragedy, beauty and cost. Every decision made in conservation balances fidelity to the past with the need to communicate its meaning to the present. Conservators, historians, and artists work as collaborators across time, connecting the lives of those who built the palace to those who seek to understand it, creating a living bridge between centuries of human experience. Preservation is also a quiet battle against entropy, against the inevitable forces of decay that time imposes on all things. Roofs leak, humidity seeps, foundations settle. Yet human intervention, informed by meticulous research and decades of expertise, fights back with subtlety, care, and devotion. The act of preservation is therefore both heroic and meditative. It requires the endurance of patience, the sensitivity to detail, and the empathy to honor human labor and creativity. Every repaired ceiling, every polished floor, every revived fountain is a testament to a human commitment that mirrors, in intensity and consequence, the ambition of the palace's original creators. There is also an element of revelation in preservation, a slow uncovering of hidden narratives. Beneath layers of paint, dust, and restoration, traces of lives emerge, a hidden mark left by a craftsman, a note tucked into a wall, a subtle imperfection that speaks to human hands at work. These fragments of memory remind those who maintain Versailles that the palace is not merely an object of art, but a living archive of human emotion, aspiration, and sacrifice. Preservation is thus a process of dialogue with the past, an attempt to make visible what was once invisible, to honor what is often overlooked, and to sustain both the aesthetic and the human stories embedded in every surface. To witness the preservation of Versailles is to feel the weight of history and the fragility of beauty simultaneously. It is a place where human obsession, ambition, and devotion continue to manifest in quiet, meticulous labor. The palace demands attention, respect, and care, and those who answer that call are aware that their efforts sustain more than a building. They sustain the memory of countless lives, dreams, and sacrifices, a continuum that binds past and present. The gold, marble, and mirrors may shine, but it is the human labor, the vigilance, and the obsession with detail that give them life, that allow the palace to remain more than a relic, allowing it to breathe with the pulse of centuries. And so, Versailles continues to endure, not merely as a palace, but as a testament to the fragile persistence of beauty, the quiet heroism of those who care for it, and the unending dialogue between ambition and mortality. Every restoration, every carefully measured intervention, every laborious act of preservation is an act of reverence. The palace reminds us that splendor is never free, that human effort underpins even the most dazzling illusion, and that legacy is fragile, demanding attention, obsession, and devotion across generations. It is a living chronicle, an organism of memory, and a mirror reflecting both the brilliance and the costs of human aspiration, waiting for those who can see beyond its golden surfaces to the lives and devotion that make its survival possible.